You breathe about 22,000 times a day, and almost nobody thinks about it. It's the most automatic thing your body does. No effort, no intention, just this constant invisible exchange happening in the background of every moment of your life. But here's what most people have never been told. The air you breathe doesn't just pass through you, it shapes you. At the cellular level, in ways that are measurable, documented, and frankly kind of astonishing. And when you change what you're breathing, even for just 30 days, your body begins a repair process that most people don't even know is possible. Most of us assume the lungs are basically a filter. Air comes in, oxygen gets extracted, waste goes out. Simple, passive, fixed. But that's not how it works at all. Your lungs are living tissue. They're lined with roughly 300 million tiny structures called alveoli, microscopic air sacs, each one wrapped in a dense web of capillaries. And those alveoli are not static. They respond to their environment. They adapt. They repair. Which means the condition of your lungs right now is not a permanent state. It's a current snapshot of everything your respiratory system has been exposed to, and everything it's been quietly trying to recover from. So what actually happens when you give it something better to work with? The first thing to understand is what chronic low-grade air pollution does to the respiratory system, because it's not what most people imagine. You don't have to live next to a factory or smoke a pack a day to be affected. Urban air, traffic exhaust, indoor chemical off-gassing from furniture and cleaning products, secondhand smoke. These contain fine particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, and volatile organic compounds that your lungs absorb continuously. And when those particles land on the delicate lining of your airways, your immune system responds. It sends inflammatory signals. It dispatches white blood cells. It tries to neutralize the threat. That response is protective in the short term. But when it runs constantly, day after day, year after year, it creates a state of chronic low-level inflammation in the airway tissue itself. The lining thickens slightly. Mucus production increases. The tiny hair-like structures called cilia, which normally sweep debris up and out of the airways, become sluggish and far less effective. Your respiratory system is still functioning, but it's working harder than it should, and recovering less than it could. And here's the critical part. None of this feels dramatic. There's no alarm, no obvious signal, just a gradual, invisible decline in efficiency that most people chalk up to aging, or stress, or just the way things are. Within the first 24 to 48 hours of breathing cleaner air, your cilia begin to recover function. They were never destroyed, just suppressed. And once the constant irritant load drops, they start moving again at their natural rhythm. This is not a metaphor. This is a measurable mechanical shift. The airways begin clearing more effectively. Many people notice this as increased mucus production in the first few days, which sounds counterintuitive, but is actually the system doing exactly what it's supposed to do, finally flushing out what's been accumulating. By the end of the first week, something more significant begins. The inflammatory signaling in the airway lining starts to decrease. The immune cells that were on constant low-level alert begin to stand down. The tissue itself, the epithelial lining of the bronchial tubes, begins a process of cellular renewal. The outer cells that bore the brunt of the irritant exposure are gradually replaced through normal cell turnover, which in airway tissue happens on a cycle of roughly 1 to 3 weeks. You are, in a very literal sense, building new tissue, cleaner tissue. A landmark study published in the American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine followed adults with moderate exposure to urban air pollution who relocated to significantly cleaner air environments for 30 days. Researchers measured lung function through spirometry, a standard test of how much air the lungs can move and how fast. After 30 days, participants showed measurable improvements in both forced vital capacity, which is the total volume of air you can exhale, and forced expiratory volume, which measures how powerfully you can push air out. The improvements weren't dramatic in isolation, but they were consistent, statistically significant, and they continued past the 30-day mark in participants who maintained cleaner air exposure. The researchers concluded that the respiratory system retains meaningful adaptive capacity well into adulthood, far longer than most people assume. And this is the part most people miss entirely. It's not just the lungs. The respiratory system is the gateway to the bloodstream. When your lung tissue is inflamed and your alveoli are less efficient, the oxygen transfer across the alveolar membrane decreases. Not dramatically. Your blood oxygen saturation might look perfectly normal on a pulse oximeter. But the efficiency of the exchange matters deeply. Less efficient gas exchange means your cardiovascular system has to work slightly harder to deliver the same amount of oxygen to your tissues. Your resting heart rate edges up. Your blood pressure tends to run slightly higher. Your muscles and organs receive slightly less oxygen per unit of effort. None of this is dramatic enough to be noticeable day to day. But cumulatively, over months and years, it compounds. It accumulates silently in the background, the same way the pollution itself does. When you remove the chronic irritant load and allow the alveolar tissue to recover, that exchange improves. People often describe it as breathing easier, but what they're actually experiencing is more efficient oxygen delivery to every cell in the body. Energy levels stabilize. Sleep quality tends to improve because the cardiovascular system isn't working as hard overnight. Exercise feels less effortful at the same intensity. Morning fatigue lifts more quickly. These aren't placebo effects. They're downstream consequences of a respiratory system finally operating closer to its actual capacity. Now, the mistake that almost everyone makes when they start thinking about air quality is going too narrow. They think outdoor pollution. They think where I live, what city, what zip code, and they stop there. But research consistently shows that indoor air quality is often 2 to 5 times worse than outdoor air, even in heavily polluted cities. The culprits are everywhere, and most of them are completely invisible. Volatile compounds, off-gassing from synthetic carpets and furniture, formaldehyde from pressed wood products, mold spores in humid bathrooms, nitrogen dioxide from gas stoves, particulates from scented candles and aerosol sprays. You seal yourself inside these environments for 8, 10, 12 hours a day and breathe the same recycled air. And because there's no visible smoke, no obvious smell, no sensation of discomfort, there's no feedback loop telling your body that anything is wrong. The single most impactful shift most people can make isn't moving to the countryside. It's ventilation. Opening windows for 15 to 20 minutes each morning, even in a city, dramatically reduces the concentration of accumulated indoor volatile compounds. It resets the air. Adding 1 or 2 well-documented air filtering plants, pothos, peace lily, spider plant, provides a modest but real contribution to indoor air quality over time. And if you're serious about recovery, a HEPA-filtered air purifier in the room where you sleep is one of the highest leverage investments you can make, because it means 8 solid hours every night where your lungs are working in genuinely clean air. That's a third of your life, operating in conditions that support repair instead of constantly demanding damage control. There's one more layer worth understanding. Breathing cleaner air doesn't just affect the lungs, it affects the brain. The olfactory nerve, which processes smell, is the only cranial nerve with a direct pathway to the brain's limbic system. Chronic low-level exposure to pollutants has been linked in recent research to subtle but measurable increases in neuroinflammation. Cleaner air reduces that inflammatory load. People often report improved mental clarity and mood stability within the first 2 to 3 weeks. And while that connection sounds almost too simple, the mechanism is increasingly well documented. A less inflamed body is a clearer thinking, more emotionally regulated body. The brain and the lungs are not separate systems running parallel tracks. They are deeply, chemically connected. The realistic picture of 30 days of cleaner air is this. Not a transformation, not a cure, but a measurable, meaningful shift in the direction your entire system is moving. Cilia, recovering function. Airway lining, reducing inflammation. Alveolar efficiency improving. Oxygen delivery to your tissues increasing. Cardiovascular strain easing. Neuroinflammation declining. These are quiet, compounding improvements, happening largely below the threshold of moment-to-moment awareness. Until one day you notice the stairs feel easier, that your morning tightness has quietly disappeared, that you wake up with more energy than you went to bed with, and you realize that your body was trying to heal the entire time. It just needed the conditions to do it. Your lungs have been adapting to their environment your entire life. They adapted to whatever you've been breathing, and they will adapt again if you give them something worth adapting to. That process is already available to you. It starts with the very next breath.